Welcome to another edition of TM3 Impact. My name is Tomas Martinez, and today I have my dear friend, David Zammiello. He is the recently retired president and CEO of Project Quest, and he's also retired with 33 years of service at USAA. David, I'm so fired up to have you on the TM3 podcast.
Tomas, good to see you. Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Yes, well, let's dive right in.
Let's go.
David, I want to know your San Antonio story. How did you come to live in this amazing city?
Wow, as old as I am, I have to go back in time, but I'm from a military family. So actually originally from upstate New York, Rome, New York. And because of being in the military, we were transferred down here in the late 60s, which brought us to a suburb of San Antonio, which was Church, Texas, and my dad was stationed at Randolph Air Force Base. So that brought us here in the late 60s. That goes back and marks my age and time. And so grew up in the Church area right outside of San Antonio. We had a small stint going back to New York when I was in high school, lived in Syracuse, New York, which is the western part of the state for a while, and then came back down here to settle once and for all in the mid-'70s in the big town of Church, Texas.
Okay. Well, the military, City USA.
Military, yes, sir.
I love it. I did not know that. I didn't know it was the military that brought you here. Now, let's talk a little bit about growing up in San Antonio at that time. You know, with your mom, your brother. Talk a little bit about growing up in San Antonio. What do you remember most about growing up in San Antonio?
Sure. Think about this. Church at the time, being a suburb of San Antonio, was a very small, tight-knit community tied to Randolph Air Force Base. And growing up as the oldest of three boys in a single household headed up by my mother. Yeah. So those dynamics right there really kind of shape a little bit of who you are. But Church, and what I loved about growing up and went to Clemens High School, was the diversity of the kids you got to play with and actually interact with. And I have some very dear friends that I had way back then. So that close-knit of the community really kind of shaped a little bit of who I am. And then also, like I said, being the oldest boy of three brothers and having a single mom who worked all the time puts a lot of different responsibilities on you of how you navigate life going forward. And so you certainly get those life lessons early on. So those two things, I think, being in the Church community at that point and having a great network of close friends that you grew up with, but also then being in the family structure where you're expected to do a little bit more and have that little responsibility really shapes who you are. And I think about the kids today, and if you go back to that time, summertime, in those times, you're out playing in the yard. You're drinking water from a water hose, you're throwing the ball with your friends, and it was just a different way of growing up. And those days really did, I think, impact and influence a little bit of who I am today.
Big time. We'll talk about, it sounds like, I read the article in the Express News, they were talking about Project Quest and really just the amazing experience that you brought to what you did there, and we'll get to that. But you talked about growing up with with a single mom, you know what I mean, and growing up at that time. At what age was it kind of like? Were you when you were like, okay, my parents, they're splitting up? At what age? You remember the age?
Absolutely.
What age was that?
I was 11 years old.
Oh my! Now that's formidable.
Yeah.
That's formidable. Yeah, at that time. So talk about the impact of mom in terms of just from that standpoint to getting you to where you start to leave high school.
Yeah, my mom played a very influential role and really stressed education. But going back to that point, that question that you brought up, and if you think about, again, different times and different eras, the idea of divorce in the early 70s was just, it had a different reaction to it, and so that was a surprise and certainly jolted us in a certain direction, but that was formative in that sense. So if you think about that situation, that puts my mother having to go to work. So she took a job in the HEB warehouse and worked night shift. So that, again, kind of cascades into being relatively young and then being thrust in that role of like, okay, I'm in charge and I've got to help make sure we navigate life a little bit. And she certainly did set an example. My mom, I think, as far as showing a work ethic and the commitment to family and stressing education, even though she wasn't educated. She grew up as a migrant farmer picking cotton from San Angelo to California. So she didn't have the idea of an education, but she knew how important it was. So if you take that and say she's a single mom, she's got 3 boys, she's working a tough job doing night shift, but yet I think sprinkled in those great life lessons just by the walk and talk. And so that certainly influenced me in that sense, and my brothers also, about, it is how you show up. It is about, working hard. It's about relationships. You have to have a certain sense of self-reliance and responsibility to kind of be who you're going to be intentionally. And life's not easy sometimes. You're going to get knocked down. So all of that, those life lessons got really packaged at a very young age and certainly shaped my journey trying to navigate coming out of high school. And I wasn't a good high school student by any shape of the imagination. I certainly was not college material. And any of my former or longtime friends that are listening to this podcast saying, that guy, no, he was, and that just is another example of you can't picture someone at a certain age and determine what the outcome's going to be.
Right.
Everyone's got a story.
Yeah.
And the story has a lot of life lessons into it. Like I said, engagement experiences that are going to shape you, and where you start. It's not where you start, but how you finish and how you navigate along the way. And for me, that childhood experience, so to speak, with being in that kind of household certainly brought some great lessons to me and my brothers that carried us forward in a way that said, it's not going to be easy, but you're going to have to figure it out. And how do you continue to persevere and work through that? And I think that's probably characteristics that carried me through coming out of that stage of life, trying to figure out how to get and do the education thing, and ultimately, the work thing. Like I said, coming out of high school, I was definitely not college material. I limped into getting into San Antonio College.
Now, I hear you say that. I hear you say that, but I'm curious what you mean by that. So, because I have my definition of like college material, right? Because I had no plans to go to college, like zero. Okay, my mom had a different plan for me. It kind of sound like your mom. Moms have a different plan. But like 16-year-old high school David, like what was 16-year-old high school David like at that point?
I don't know if I can talk about that live here, but so you think about it like this. I played high school football, so you're kind of focused on that part of life and what goes all into that. And so the classroom time and the focus of that was not a priority for me. I feel you. So you're interested in different things. And so the application of trying to figure out, I need to study to make the grades and all that was kind of secondary to the other part of the experience, which is, playing ball, hanging out with your friends and doing those kind of things. So it just had a little bit of a different focus. So I was not a dedicated student that certainly paid attention to his grades. Therefore, when it came time to finish high school, and I remember my mom, kind of saying to me, you need to go to school. You need to get an education. She goes, I don't know how we're going to pay for it. You got to go figure it out. And so that was really the launching point. And how I figured it out is I made an attempt to start at San Antonio College. Lasted probably about 6 to 8 weeks. And then I quit because I said I just wasn't for me.
You just said, I'm done.
I'm done.
Interesting.
And took a job, and I did a job where I was working at Steel Corporation in Braunfels. Did some work at the Sheraton Motor Inn on Austin Highway, and so that was a pause to kind of reset. However, I think that pause, and I looked around at some of the things that were going on, and I went, this is not good. I need to really think about it. So I did, after a year, go back in to SAC and kind of tried to buckle down and get through SAC. And I did. So a couple of years of going through SAC, and then thank goodness, and this is why my affinity for UTSA at that time, because UTSA in the early 80s was still just growing up. And they were taking all comers to get into school. And I had just good enough grades coming out of SAC to then transfer and get started at UTSA. And at that time, UTSA was 4 buildings. And my wife and I, Cindy, had gotten married right around that time too. So she was a chemistry major, at UTSA, and I was an accounting business data systems major in the 80s, and we got married. So we kind of made that track through there. And again, UTSA for me was that gateway. I've talked about this many, many times, that had it not been for UTSA and allowing me the opportunity to get an education and acquire that particular credential or degree, I'm not sure where life would have been.
Yeah.
And so, for the last 30 years, so I've been very much supporting the UTSA programs because education is important.
Yep.
And for people, which I consider like me, that are just trying to find their way through, you need avenues to get into opportunities to build your credentials and your expertise. And so UTSA at that time allowed that. And then by the grace of God, just being able to interview with USAA. So it's kind of interesting how these dots connected, and it really just comes back to just persevering and staying in the game. Stay the course. Stay the course, and having the support of people like my wife and others who we worked hard to get through there. But then the USAA opportunity occurred on the campus of UTSA, so I finally got through, graduated, and entered a program or training program at USAA.
Wow.
And so I always look back and say, I don't know how that happened, but I think the underlying thing, if folks are trying to kind of consider how to navigate life, it comes back to the basic fundamentals. It's about having the perseverance and the determination or dedication to move forward and want something better, and be willing to lean into it. But then also having other people around you, because you don't do it alone.
Yep.
And the thing about life lessons and the people you meet, you never accomplish anything by yourself. And so having that foundation that, a mother who's stressed the education, who said, you need to go this way, I don't know how you're going to get there, and then role modeled it in her own behavior, kind of sets that foundation. And you can see that in my brothers too. Dean and John have the same underlying qualities about them, that they're just going to be determined to have some degree of success, however they define it.
Yeah.
And so that pathway and those dots connect, which led me to that opportunity to USA. And
for 33 years.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Tomas,
it's amazing.
Again, it's funny how life is, but I never, at that point in time, imagined, say, okay, this is going to be a lifelong career.
Yeah.
It was.
Of course, yeah.
At that point, you're 22, 23 years old.
Yep.
I thought at that time, it's a great opportunity. Let's get some experience. Cindy was finishing up her chemistry degree at that time. I said, I'd give her a chance to get her degree. Then we'll figure out where it goes.
Yeah.
And, one thing just led to another.
Yeah.
And through the USA, again, another organization that I have a great deal of respect for. I mean, their internal training and development programs at that time just offered opportunities.
Yeah.
And I think, again, if you want to flip that to kind of a lesson learned conversation, those opportunities, whether you're in a corporate organization or whatever you're doing, opportunities present themselves, but you got to prepare yourself for the opportunity.
No, 100%. This is what's interesting, because I want to go back, because I think for most people, when they quit something, right? They quit, and there's this idea of like they go through some type of pain. So you quit, you leave SAC, right? And now, had you met your wife at that point? Had y'all started dating it already? At that point?
Yeah.
So y'all are dating already. Now, was she already in school?
Yeah.
Did she stay in school during that time when you kind of stepped back from school?
She stayed in school, but later on, she actually stopped going to school to help support us to get through school.
Ah, wow. Yeah. See, again, that's powerful, right? But going back to that moment when you kind of backed away from school, if you took your brain back there, what do you think was what was the catalyst to say, yeah, this isn't for me at this point? Like, because I know that there's some people that are going to hear this that are going to connect with this in a way of maybe they might find themselves at that point where they can kind of connect to what was it that had you say, yeah, I don't really feel like doing this, right? And then I want to follow that back up with, and then what made you go back? Because, going back to something you start is hard. It's really difficult. And so that first part of that is, answer that first part of that question that I just asked there. What was that pain point?
Yeah, I have to go back and really kind of think through that. But for me, the teenage version of David back then, I think just was lacking confidence.
Okay.
I mean, there was certainly an element of lack of confidence because I'd never been performed as a student.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was the pathway. Young, wanting to kind of hang out and not have to have the responsibility.
Yeah.
So not being able to think that this was the path that I could actually do it was probably the most important thing, and probably having that element of just laziness and just being very complacent and saying not wanting to do it.
Yep.
And think I can figure this out. So that's the first part of the question.
Right.
But then as you step away, and I can remember this distinctly, I was working at, I'll leave the corporation but I was working at a steel corporation in New Braunfels. And so night shift. And so night shift. Think about this. So we would go in.
You're 20? How old are you at this time?
Yeah, I'm probably 18, 19, something like that.
All right, fair.
And night shift. So we would go to work and we'd start work at 3:15 in the afternoon. We would work till 1:15 in the morning. And night shift 4 nights a week, and then you'd work half a day on Friday. So you're putting in 45 hours a week, but you're working crazy hours. Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, and someone can probably research this, but I think the wage rate at that point, I'm probably making $2.85 an hour.
$2.85.
Something like that.
Okay.
Something crazy like that. And, the environment that you're working in certainly was eye-opening to me in saying, where do you go from here? Well, certainly I had the insight to say this is a dead end in that sense, and I didn't want that. And then, so I'm moving back home and having to kind of reset there.
That's a pain point.
That's a pain point.
Yes.
And then resetting, and then, getting back to work closer to home. So I was working back at the Sheraton. So those experiences, really, you could see that even at that age, there's nowhere to go. And so that idea about education certainly kept ringing true. And so it was like, I need to do this.
Did you meet anybody that said anything to you? You know what I mean? Because sometimes you kind of come across paths with somebody and they just say something and you're just kind of like, it's like, because what your parents say, we don't want to hear it.
Right.
But it's like, did someone ever just say something to you that they saw something in you?
Later,
at that time?
Later in
Later?
life.
Okay, yeah.
Later in
Not
life.
at that point.
Not at that point in
Yeah.
time. I mean, at that point, I think it was really pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and saying that, if I'm going to do something, I've got to be able to take care of that myself.
Yeah.
But still foundationally about, some of the things you learn when you're a kid, like I talked about earlier, were still present. And this ringing voice in my head about the importance of education and trying to build a life through that certainly was still there. So it pushed me back in that direction.
Yeah.
And it was certainly, now looking back on it, it was clearly the right thing to do. And I think because of that, the work that I did at USAA, but the work I did later at Quest, was because of that journey. I think you and I both talk about this, that education and training are so important. And the people that, I had a chance to work with later in my career that lacked that confidence. And I think it just comes back to not having expectations set or having the confidence of how to go do that, or the belief that you can do that. I think that as I look back on my journey, and if you talk about it from a life lesson standpoint, that it can be done. It's not going to be an easy path, but it's worth the path. You have to just kind of lean into it and put the sweat equity into it. And that's kind of my storyline that said from beginning through the things we talked about to where I ended up eventually. It was a long journey. You asked this question about, did someone see something in you?
Yeah.
And yes, the short answer to that is yes. As I said, that people, you don't ever achieve any degree of success on your own. And I've said that a few times. And in particular, to drive that point home from a life lesson standpoint, I was very early in my career at USA. And I'm saying early 33 years, in the first 10 years of that career. And as I got to, being there about 8 or 9 or 10 years, I took a particular role in the company, but there was an executive who had that conversation with me, because I think that the thing that I tried to do, and I think anybody that's listening could relate to this, that I've always believed it's how you show up. And that work ethic thing really carries through. So I always try to approach whatever assignment or whatever work I did with that idea of 100% all in. I'm going to give it my best. So I think I demonstrated to those around me a strong work ethic and a commitment to do good work. And I think that got noticed. And again, the lesson is you never know who's watching.
Yeah.
You know, you never know who's watching you. You know, you're always kind of interviewing. You're always, if you have that idea. So that point in time, I remember it distinctly. He calls me in the office, and he says to me, and I think at that time I'm probably like in my early 30s.
Okay.
Think about it. And he goes, "Hey, Dave, have you ever thought about your career?" He goes, "You do really good work. I've noticed you." And so we had what I would call my first mentoring conversation ever in my life, where someone really kind of, as you said, stepped in and said,
Yeah.
"Hey, I've noticed you. I think you're doing a good job, and I'd like to know what interests you have and where you want to take your career." So that, I will tell you, was a pivot point, in my journey and my story. And so that conversation led to a mentoring relationship. And at that particular point in time, USAA had a program that was called MAP, and MAP stood for Management Access Program. So my mentor said, "I think you'd be a great candidate." And MAP was a way internally to develop talent and create avenues for people to take on greater leadership responsibilities.
Okay, yeah.
So at that time, I am a information asset protection analyst, the cybersecurity person at that point at USA in the IT side. And through that relationship, he helped promote me. I had to go through a series of tests and interviews.
Yeah.
And so a handful of internal candidates were identified to go into this MAP program. And that changed the whole trajectory of my professional life. But it goes back to that story. So I left the work that I was doing in the IT side and spent the next 18 months or so in this internal development program, learning about USA
Wow.
top to bottom,
Yeah.
and eventually being prepared to take on my first leadership role. So July 1995, I become the director of organizational planning there, and that was my first formal leadership role. After spending,
At what age?
I'm 34,
Wow.
34 years old.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And so the patience of having spent almost 10 years in the organization, and again, what I really appreciate about USA, it's thousands of people, but being able to be identified in that group and have that opportunity, along with others. It wasn't just me. There was a other group of folks that had that same opportunity to move into this role. And so I was taken out of my formal day-to-day job and spent, like I said, 18 months, in that role, which led me to taking that first leadership role. But it comes back to the things we're talking about. If you think about the lessons and connecting those dots, having that foundation and some sense of responsibility, demonstrating some degree of perseverance and commitment to move forward, and then having people that care about you intervene. And I'd be remiss if I'd even and add to that. My Cindy has been great with me, and she certainly sacrificed a lot along the way, but she played a critical role, especially at that very early stage of just being supportive and helping promote the ideas. So let's keep moving forward. And so you do stand on the shoulders of the others. If I could just tell you one more story,
please.
one more story. So fast forward, I just told you it's July of 1995. And so you take on this role, and then there's a whole different level of journey that starts. And that's why, again, I think USA and its management development programs really were amazing. So I progress through a couple of different levels, and then I am promoted to executive director. That title at USA at that time was the first entry level for executive leadership.
Yeah.
So you move from director, you become an executive director. And so now it's probably 1998 or so.
Okay.
So there's a celebration that takes place. The old Aldo's there on Fredericksburg Road that was there. They're now on I-10.
Yeah.
We had a little luncheon there in that time, and it was to celebrate the promotion. It was a promotion luncheon.
Yeah.
And so handful of people, about 15, 20 people there. And Reggie Williams, who was the gentleman I'm talking about that actually became my mentor, and we
the one that told you in the beginning.
Yeah,
Okay.
And Reggie and I have maintained a lifelong relationship.
I bet.
We still talk, to this day, and I just hold him in very high regards. So we're having this luncheon event at Aldo's, and it's a congratulations, great job, Dave. And so he gets up to speak, and he says, "Hey, Dave, congratulations." Make a few comments. He goes, look around the room. He goes, "There's two things I'm going to tell you," and this goes back as I said, October of '98. So here's what 15, 20 some odd years. I'm telling you the story today.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Look around the room," and he said, "Your success that you achieved, you didn't do it by yourself. These folks here all invested in you." And again, I worked with some amazing people. She goes, "Point number one is, as I said, you don't achieve success on your own. You stand on the shoulders of others."
Yeah.
And never forget that.
Yeah.
And I haven't. I really haven't. I have tried to apply that learning because of the experience I had of my journey and the people that have stepped in and prompted me up and believed in me. That has just been so inspirational to me. He goes, "Second thing is," he goes, "someday you're going to be in a position of responsibility where it's going to be your turn to prime the pump. Just as people have invested in you and you've helped move them along, you're going to be in a position to help others and bring them along."
Yeah.
And so those two things, and in particular the second thing, it influenced me throughout my USAA career to be an avid mentor and help individuals that were seeking, how do I get better at this, and offer whatever lessons or things I could share. So I took the idea of mentor and helping others develop very seriously and invested in that. But that also then really influenced my decision when I retired from USAA, that I knew that there was going to be a chapter 2.
Yeah.
After 33 years, I knew there was going to be a chapter 2. Didn't know what it was going to be, and then the opportunity for Project Quest emerged through a colleague of mine. And when I looked at the opportunity, that idea of being able to prime the pump, Quest has a wonderful mission. They were well recognized and respected in the workforce development area. And so when I saw the mission and understood what they did, it just resonated with me for everything we just talked about.
Your story.
Yeah, you connect all those dots.
Yep.
And I said, here I am having a chance to retire from an amazing Fortune 100 company. And now this opportunity presents itself to work for this nonprofit that works in an area and serves an area for people that are seeking to build their confidence, get access to resources. And I could see myself as a Project Quest participant. So when the opportunity presented itself and I spoke to the board and what they were looking for and what interested me, I know they looked at me a little bit like, why would you want this opportunity?
Yeah.
But they didn't know.
Sure.
They didn't know. They didn't know the whole.
They didn't know your story.
They didn't know the whole thing.
Right.
And so we connected those dots, and I will tell you, I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of my time with Project Quest. It's an amazing organization, and the way that it intersects with a lot of different parts of our community. And helps individuals, as I say, build that confidence, gain access to resources. The stories of listening to their journey and how Quest helped them, that was an awesome opportunity for me to step into it and take everything that had been the previous 30 years of my life and lean into it. And the team at Quest, amazing professionals, our board, and so it was a perfect fit for me. In that sense, and be able to work with the community and our city government, the county, and others to help find ways and solutions to, as I said, offer confidence, reach out. There's so much opportunity in the city, and there's so many individuals that I think want to find a way to make a better life, just don't know how.
Where do you begin? And that leads to this idea, when you think about Quest, one of the things that I thought about is, The timing of that it's pretty crazy to think, because was it 18 that you started? What year did you start to quit?
17.
17. Okay. So you're 17. So it's prior to the pandemic, right? But what was, like, right away, what were the challenges that you were facing leading this organization right from the beginning? Because your staff, you had a small staff in the beginning, right? Budgets were not the same as when you left. It was a different budget when you left. Talk a little bit about those challenges in the beginning when you started.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as I took the role on, I tell this story all the time, that I came into the idea with a very altruistic mindset that this is going to be a great opportunity to serve, to do some of the things we talked about as far as helping others. So I had this, rose-colored glass view of how this was going to be a great experience to help others. Yeah. And so whether you call that a touch of arrogance with a touch of ignorance, like I can do this and how hard could it be, and then actually stepping into the role. Yeah. And I tell this to others that, be careful of what you ask for sometimes, but also, being more open-minded than I think I was, because I thought that it was going to be a different opportunity. And so as I entered into the role, it certainly opened my eyes to how challenging and difficult it is for, in this case, nonprofit organizations to operate. And so the board, when we put this idea together and I joined them, was, how do you take Quest to the next level? It had been serving the community at that time for 25 years, had a wonderful reputation, and they offered the opportunity with the idea about how do we grow it and expand it and maybe redefine it a little bit, still stay core to the mission, but offer a different way to deliver services. So to answer your question, those first couple of months, there was a lot of listening and learning. I mean, really, the first part was really trying to understand the nonprofit industry, workforce development, how Quest interacted with the city government, and kind of put all those pieces together. Yeah, and
that's a very delicate, web of everything of what you just described.
Yeah, the idea of the relationships and them getting to know me. So it was certainly just navigating through and trying to figure out, how this fits, and then going back to the board shortly after that, saying, "All right, here's a game plan." And we put together basically a strategy in a 3-year game plan that said, little by little, we're going to change some of our processes, expand our training offerings, and putting those things in place. And nothing, the team had done a wonderful job, but it was time to kind of raise the bar in terms of how the organization operated around its processes. And so we put those things and started to put those things in place.
Now, but let me stop you in this regard, because I'm curious, because obviously you come with 33 years of experience in 3 different areas at USAA. Go over your 3 areas that you did. Didn't you do 3 areas at USAA?
Yeah. So yes. So I spent about 10 years in IT.
IT.
And then I spent another period of time in what I call process engineering, operational effectiveness, management. Like that.
Okay. And then the last one?
And the last one was really in human resources.
Okay.
So I was staffing, recruiting, training, compensation, executive.
Isn't that rare at USAA to be able to be in 3 different?
Yeah.
That's rare. Yeah. I remember you telling me about that when we were in LSA together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you have this unique skill set, and you come to a nonprofit with all of this experience of process building, leadership, human resources. I would imagine you're probably making a list of there's 5,000 things we could do, right? Or change. But coming in as an outsider, you said, let me just stop and listen. Yeah. And look, which would be really difficult to do, because I'm sure after day 1 or 2, you're gonna look around and go, I know what we need. I know these are the things we need to change, but you wanted to stop and listen. And this is a message to anybody that gets an opportunity, right, to lead something, is to be patient and learn as much as you can. But I guess my question to this is, of all that you learned from USAA, what was the first thing that you're like, I need to implement this at Quest to help us raise the bar?
Oh, wow. So that listening tour took about 5 months, right?
Okay.
And so I think the where we started it's going to sound, and for those that know me are probably going to smile at this, but it started with we need to have kind of a thought process around a plan of action.
Okay.
I mean, I think we needed to kind of organize, well, not kind of, we did. It was really kind of lay out what is going to be our roadmap going forward. And that roadmap had various elements to it that range from process to services to how you budget, how you report, your metrics and those kind of things. Bringing that discipline. It's funny, when I was about to take the job, I had a former colleague of mine who was I worked for at USA, who led another nonprofit here in San Antonio, and we had lunch together. And his advice to me was, you know, you can't bring what we called USA intensity to the role because the two won't be compatible.
Okay.
And so I remembered that, and that's why, you know, I think any good things I've learned from leadership, any good leadership is you got to stop and listen and learn. And
100%.
You got to do that and not have those preconceived notions, because then, you know, some of the things or skills that I learned over those years, you figure out what would work in this scenario. Not everything that you would do in a large corporation applies here, but any business, any organization you run, there's fundamentals to it.
Yep.
And you apply them, whether it's to your family, to your church activities, to your small business, to a nonprofit. And some of those fundamentals is you need to have some structure, roadmap, some process in place, and be able to then communicate that, create accountability. And so it wasn't anything like one thing, but it was just bringing, I think, a sense of structure and focus on different things, and then really showing the team, because it gets back to developing your people, what they're capable of doing. So the key part to me was kind of assessing the talent we had, and we did have some very good talent that was interested and eager to learn and do different things. So you create, if it's going to sound cliche, you create the vision.
Yep.
You try to explain why you want to go there, hopefully motivate and inspire folks to unleash their potential, and everyone kind of works together collaboratively. And so the transformation that we went through in Quest was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. What did you start out with? How many employees did y'all start out with when you first started?
Yeah, in 2017, we were probably somewhere around 21, 22 employees.
21, 22?
21, 22
okay,
employees.
Got it.
Yeah, and then when I retired, we actually had 44 employees.
Wow.
But that was really more driven by the pandemic, for lack of a better term, but also I think the city's, the main thing was the city's investment in what's called Ready to Work.
Okay.
And so if anyone's following that in the local community, that is the city's initiative to train several thousand people, and using taxpayer dollars. There was a proposition back in the 2020 election, Proposition B, that promoted putting taxpayer dollars in place to help train individuals. Quest became one of 4 primary service providers to help for that. And because of that influx of investment, through that and then what was called Train for Jobs, we expanded our services to meet the demand that was put in front of us. We grew the staff and our services in response to the city's desire for us to have more capacity and capabilities. And it was, and doing that during a pandemic was, quite a challenge.
That's challenging.
Yeah, but all those lessons, Tomas, about, how to run an organization, how do you build structure, they all apply. How do you develop capacity? It takes, some planful thinking, it takes organizing your team, it takes a little bit of perseverance, dedication, and it takes a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
And when I say luck, back in 2018, Quest was recognized by the Zuckerberg Foundation, by the Rockefeller Foundation and Zuckerberg Group, as being one of the 10 nonprofits in the nation that was really achieving its mission. As a result, we received a $1 million.
I remember
grant.
that. I remember that.
Yeah. And when I say luck, that the result of our hard work got the notice, and this opportunity through the Rockefeller Foundation for this funding allowed us to have funds to build infrastructure. So it allowed us to redo our computer systems, to upgrade our technology, to change our footprint, and being able to change that and doing that in the front end before the pandemic set us up in a good place along the
Yeah.
way. Yeah. So
That's it. You know, it's interesting. It's I know there's a quote about that, right? Like luck is being prepared when it's been that when the opportunity comes,
Yeah.
like this idea, it's right. What is it really lucky, or was it just the circumstances all came together, right? It's kind of serendipity,
I think
But
they
you're
say
right.
luck.
It's kind of both, right? Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
So I think luck is when opportunity meets preparation.
When opportunity meets, there it is. Yes,
Yeah.
when opportunity meets preparation, right? And people say, "Well, that's lucky." Well, the opportunity came, and I was ready.
Yeah,
I was
That-
prepared.
that's the point I was going to say.
Yes.
The work that, and it predated me. So when Quest was in operation for 25 years before I showed up,
Right.
and they had already built a reputation for being a top-notch workforce development agency. We just took it and built upon that success.
Right.
But that success allowed us to be competitive for that Rockefeller opportunity.
Yeah.
And then being recognized, we were then ready to take that opportunity and build upon it. And so the
Yeah.
investments were well underway, and that served as a catalyst to be ready. So when the pandemic hit, we were.
You may not have been prepared without that.
Exactly.
Right.
I hate to think about
Yeah.
what would have happened had we not been prepared, and then trying to navigate a nonprofit during the pandemic. And it was counterintuitive because at that time, if you remember, the unemployment rate spiked because of, and it was, so when I say counterintuitive, the city at that time was using, trying to find ways to offset and create employment opportunities for those being displaced. And we had a massive number of citizens that were displaced. And Quest was being asked at that time, can you expand your services when we're in this environment? And we really we talked to the board, and we thought long and hard, and we felt that it was our responsibility to try to respond to it. So we're working remote. We're trying to staff up and build capacity during the pandemic using the funding that was called for Train for Jobs, and help the community recover.
Yeah.
And so
you're fully operational. I mean, you were in the thick of it during COVID.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it didn't slow down because that moved into Prop B, the 1/8 sales tax, which led to Ready to Work and being selected. So I'm very proud of the team. I can't say enough about the leadership of our board of directors, the individuals that were part of the executive team at Quest, how they just stood up to it. They just,
That's awesome.
and from my standpoint, just being able to work with individuals that had that commitment, so we are going to make this happen. It inspired and motivated me. And so the team really did an awesome job through those 2 years of navigating the pandemic, responding. And so by the time we get to where we are now, Quest is well positioned and serving the community as part of the Ready to Work team right now.
Yeah, that's exciting. So tell me about an individual story, a success story. I know you have hundreds of them, and you may not be able to say their name. I don't know if you can or you can't, but I'd love to hear somebody that kind of came through this program and then the success journey afterwards.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there is. That's the part that warmed my heart the most. We would do periodic graduations or VIP ceremonies, and you get to hear their stories and the role that Quest played, in their stories, and so there's several that stick out, in my mind. But a couple that come to mind is we had an individual, come through, and if you think about these folks, they are in their own financial situations. They're struggling to make ends meet, and where Quest fits into that equation is we're able to provide provide coaching to help somebody navigate the educational system, to keep them motivated, help them as they ebb and flow through, and keep them on task with their courses, and help them graduate and move into their own professional career. And one individual that went through our program, which I was really proud of, actually became an entrepreneur.
Okay.
And started their own training program.
Okay.
And helps create opportunities for individuals to get that basic, we don't call it CNA, but that basic medical assistant training.
Okay. Yeah.
But without Quest, they would not have finished the program, be able to then get a professional career. But we're so grateful to the opportunity and inspired to step out and start their own business, so to speak, training business. And now we have this relationship with, they're one of our training partners, providing training for Quest participants along the way. And the stories go on and on. The backstory of people that are basically homeless, living in their car, coming out of the foster system, that are just looking for an opportunity to take that next step. And Quest positions itself as that bridge. And you know, our model, predicated on our career coaches, the career coaches do such a wonderful job of being that voice of reason, that voice of building confidence and trust, that's the secret sauce to why Quest has a unique brand of workforce development, because of that hands-on coaching piece that allows individuals to have somebody they're tethered to, and we're not going to let them fail. Yeah, and so
that's powerful.
Yeah, the stories go on and on. I really want to protect, you know, people's
for sure.
Yeah, that part of it.
No, I understand.
But my gosh, when we would do graduation and listen to their testimonies, and that's what filled up the team. That's what motivated the team. That said, when you can change someone's life and be part of that, you want to come back and do more of that. And you know, we're serving more people than we ever have. But the whole Quest experience has been, you know, means a lot to me, and I'm very proud of the work that the team did. But the reason for everything we just spent the last 45 minutes talking about, all those dots connect. And I think anyone listening today, if you have that doubting yourself, or if you have that confidence factor that you're trying to overcome, if you're looking for resources, there are organizations out there like Quest and others that certainly can be that reason, that connection to help you kind of figure your way out and take that next step along the way.
And it sounds like, you know, if you think about it, I mean, basically, if somebody comes into the program, they have they get a coach, right? This may be the first person that sits down with them and says, "I believe in you."
No doubt.
Right?
No doubt.
Like this literally, and I'm just getting goosebumps just thinking about that, is you've got somebody, they're sitting across that's, you know, 30, 40 years old, and they've never had anybody believe in them, you know, like, and then teach them the fundamentals, which I mean, obviously you've addressed that, right? It's like there are basic fundamentals that you and I, we may have learned with our parents. We learned with, you know, mom and dad kind of walking us through, brothers and sisters walking us through, mentors in college that kind of sat next to us. But somebody sitting there just saying, "I believe in you." I just had I was playing pickleball with my dad. We were at Lifetime, and there was a gentleman playing with my dad, and I pulled my dad aside and I said, do you know the story of his dad and what happened with me? And my dad, you know, he didn't remember. Well, this gentleman he was playing with, he's same age as my brothers. He's in his 30s. And I sat at a Dave & Buster's with his dad, who was a military master's degree. And we were just talking, or, you know, my son was out playing or whatever. And I remember, no, I didn't have Enzo at the time. Enzo was, I don't know. I was there I brought my brothers there. Anyways, I'm sitting there talking with him. And I said, "Hey, I've got this opportunity to get this master's degree, but I really don't want to do it." And I remember he literally looked at me and he said, "You need to go get your master's. You have an opportunity. You don't have kids at this point because Enzo wasn't born yet." He goes, "You need to take advantage of this opportunity. I did it, and now you need to go do it." Now, of course, everybody around me was telling me this, but here's somebody not a part of my family looking at me saying, "You can go do it. Go take the GRE," which we all know about the GRE. Nobody wants to take the GRE, right? And I remember sitting there going, "I'm going to go get my master's degree." It took that one person just looking at me, coaching me, saying, "Hey, you can do it. Go do it," you know? But that's what we need, and that's what Project Quest provides. That's amazing. What's the website? If anybody's listening to this, what's the website for Project Quest?
www.questsa.org.
Questsa.org. That's fantastic. Now, you've retired from this too now, right? So you've got your 33 years. You were at Project Quest for how long?
33 years.
That 33 years at Quest as well?
Yeah. No, I was at Quest. 33 years USA.
USA, that's right.
5.5 years Quest.
5.5 years at Quest. And now we're moving into this next chapter, which I want to talk about because you talked about UTSA, okay? And just being a part of this program. And the other day we started talking about this whole idea of the NIL and name, image, and likeness, right? And I think I want you to talk a little bit about this because for UTSA football, like our UTSA football team is amazing. And the program of what they've built is amazing. And so now with this portal and the NIL, the landscape, as you told me earlier, everything is about to change. But the portal, talk a little bit about that and how the community of San Antonio can really step behind the Roadrunners here and help continue the legacy of what they've been building.
Well, from an alumni perspective, I mean,
I'm an alumni too, so we got to stick together.
Yeah, alumni perspective, because I can't, I don't feel that the inside of what how the program's working. I'll leave that to the coaches and the athletic director. But from an outside view looking in, I've said this to other folks, and again, I probably have a bias to the university. Back to what I talked about, that being a longtime alumni and how the university played a role in my particular life. But I just have this belief right now that just what Dr. Amy has done first with the university and where the university stands right now, I just believe UTSA is such an important element to the future of San Antonio economically. Yeah. And so I think we have to start with the institution itself and its own journey and where it is right now and some of the amazing things that have just happened in the last couple of years and what's happening with the downtown campus. And so the top research institute. So as an alumni, there's a sense of pride that the university just has emerged and continues to emerge as a really important element to the city and to our future economic development and workforce development retention. So I look at it from that standpoint. Yeah. And so when I talk about sports or I bring that up, I'm obviously very interested in the sports, and let's be honest and fair that your sports programs, and in particular probably your football programs and your basketball programs, certainly give the face to the university on a national stage. And the work that Dr. Lisa Campos has done and Coach Traylor in particular with the athletic programs in general, but the football program in particular, has really put UTSA on the map in a different way. Yeah. And so there, for those that have not followed the program in the university, I think that those dots are how I connect them, that, for the city of San Antonio first, how important the university is and what we've done academically in the programs, but then how the sports programs enhance that presence for UTSA. And as we are speaking, the idea of how college athletics has evolved. It's not just UTSA, but
it's for everybody.
Yeah, the introduction of the transfer portal that took place in 2018, so kids can now move from school to school.
Yeah, which is interesting because I literally just heard about the portal. Like it felt like a week ago, and this has been going on since 18.
I think 2018, 2019.
Wow!
And so it opens up avenues where athletes, and not just football, can make themselves available to move from one school to another, and that's got a positive and negative component to it. And I think that, not speaking for our athletic programs, but from what I've seen and being exposed to them, we've built a wonderful culture in our athletic programs. And the way that we're handling our student athletes is top notch. So hats off to all the coaches. And I've had a chance to hear them speak recently, and then, what the Coach Traylor's doing with the football program. But the complexity of sustaining that level of quality, the school's moving into the American Athletic Conference on July 1st, so different level of competition, which I think is going to be very, very exciting for the fans and for the alumni to see us compete at that level. But then is how you sustain your competitiveness in when you talk about, I just recently learned about what's considered the NIL, the name, image, likeness. Yeah. And so that certainly has added a new variable to college athletics. And I think that it's just important that we all kind of get educated on what that is and how that may impact all of our athletic programs.
Yeah.
And it seems, from what I can understand, that the community rising up and being involved of how NIL impacts your athletic program is an important new element to it. And again, I'm just really understanding it. And when you combine the transfer portal with NIL and others, it just makes the world of college athletics different. And then how does UTSA respond, to that? And again, from the outside looking in, just as an alum, I'm very interested in saying, how do you support that? And I think getting a little sense of just all of us getting knowledgeable about that and supporting the programs is really important. So I want to be thoughtful that how the university speaks about that is probably one way, but from an alumni outside looking in, just being very supportive and understanding that the landscape continues to shift, and college athletics is a different ballgame than it was several years ago.
Oh, yeah.
But how that also influences the brand of the university, and then, as I said, how the university influences, San Antonio, all those dots connect.
Well, they connect because, if we have a tier 1 university right here in San Antonio, I mean, we have UTSA, even I graduated in 99. So from 99 to today, it is literally a completely different university from when I graduated. I think back then it was 22,000 students, maybe. And what is it now?
I know it's north of 35,000 ish.
Yeah. So we're talking about a university that is getting the number of students that are at that crazy high level of almost 40,000 students, and so I think with the what you were explaining to me is now that athletes can get paid in their name, image, and likeness, this could transform, some of the recruits that we get. And so you were telling me about a website that's helping with this. You were telling me about something in San Antonio. I think you were telling me something about a group of business owners that are trying to help.
Yeah, there is, from what I understand, there is a group that's heading up what's called 210 Inspire.
There you go, 210 Inspire.
210 Inspire, which is a group of individuals coming together to help support how the community can support the NIL initiatives in sense of giving athletes an opportunity to serve in the community, but then to receive some form of, I guess, compensation, for lack of a better term, from that standpoint. And again, that's separate and apart from the university collective. This is something standalone.
It's kind of outside people organization. It's like a booster. It sounds like to me almost like a booster to some degree.
I guess you could put it in,
right.
You can put it in that category. Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I mean, I would hate to see what we've built slowly be taken away because some of these other schools. I mean, let's be honest. How much money does UT have? How much money do these other schools have? Right?
Sure.
I mean, there's endless amounts of money that they could pour into these athletes, and UTSA haven't gotten to that level yet. But we can slowly but surely start to build up because it would just think that we would start to basically all the great students go to the best schools. That's it.
And I think one thing that I've learned is across all 17 of the programs, UTSA has had a great deal of success. The baseball team, for example, right now is on a tear. They're ranked in the top 25.
Wow.
And the golf program and others have had great success along the way.
Yeah.
So you got to look at the totality, the big picture.
True. That's a good point.
That sense, because all the programs, I think, have something to contribute and have had degrees. The soccer program just had a phenomenal season. So again, from an alum, just paying attention to see, want to help the university be successful, because I think we see it as a way for San Antonio to be successful. And I just think that the work that Dr. Campos has done across all athletics, and the culture that she's built, and the quality of the coaching staff, it is something to be proud of. And we see a lot about that in the football program, but I think across all the programs, and the culture that I can see just being around it a little bit is very impressive, and very proud of it. And then you add to that these other variables around the transfer portal and how you recruit kids and maintain a roster. Certainly challenges the athletic programs in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
But we're on the right track, and I think that UTSA is certainly is a destination school for a lot of athletes, because you're going to get the education, you're going to play in in the seventh largest city in the country.
It's true.
You've got quality coaching. So there's a lot of positives that are along the way. It's just now that the landscape continues to evolve. And I think that from a community standpoint, understanding that and saying, how can we lean in to help would be something that would be worth everyone's time to kind of look at it a little closer.
Yeah. So this would be a call to all alumni, myself included. You know, I graduated in 99 with a teaching degree. We got to get involved. We got to stay connected to the university. I think that's what it's telling me. So anybody listening to this, your former UTSA student, alumni, let's get back. Let's support what they're doing. I was at that first game, the double overtime game with my mom, and we lost our mind. Like that was one of the most exciting games. I know you were at that game too. It was this year or last year, but what an exciting what they've built is phenomenal. Wrapping this up, David, I would say you talked about the fundamentals, but if you could boil it down to, you know, you've had a blessed career. You know, you've been a mentor to so many people, like to myself and to Wesley and some of the great friends from from LSA. What would you say, you know, to somebody right now that maybe they're at a point in their career where they're just kind of like, I'm not sure if I'm liking what I'm doing. I'm not sure if this is direction to me. What would you say to somebody that's kind of at that point right now in their career?
Well, I would think that's first a legit thought, because one thing that we have to all pay attention to is you got to kind of be intentional about who you want to be, right?
I love
so
that.
there's an intentionality to it that we have a tendency, I think sometimes I talk to folks, they just kind of fall into that groove and they become complacent, and then time moves on.
Yeah.
And so you know you get that question all the time about where do you want to be in 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's fine, but I think that to answer your question, just I had someone tell me one time, be who you want to be on purpose, you know? And so that requires a little bit of self-reflection about, you know, what is it that makes you up and what you're trying to accomplish with your life. And work is part of that, but it's not all how you define yourself.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the thoughts about taking that time, whatever you're doing, to reflect upon, you know, who you are and what you want to be, and kind of own that, and saying, you know, I want to be very intentional about my actions. I want to be intentional about where I want to move to. I want to be who I want to be on purpose, not by accident.
I love that.
And then be willing to seek out the resources that people take a little bit of a risk. You know, it's not wrong to ask for help or feedback, and then be willing to lean into it, because whatever reflection drives you to take a fork in the road, it's work. They call it work for a reason.
That's right.
And so it's not going to happen. You can't be the passenger in your life. You have to be in the driver's seat. And then so that point of reflection, but then be willing to commit and put the sweat equity into whatever task you're going to take on, and understand that it's not going to be an easy road. You're going to hit bumps along the way, and you're going to have to persevere through it. Yeah. So I think it kind of starts with that point of, like I said, self-reflection, and then having that idea of what you want to accomplish very intentionally, who you want to be, and then be willing, you know, be willing to take those steps and lean into it
and do the work.
Yeah, it is so easy to think about it. It is so hard to put action, because you can talk yourself out of it.
Oh, for sure.
You know, I've got this going on, I can't do this. You can talk yourself out of it. Yeah. And next thing you know, 5 years go on down the road and you're still in that situation. Yeah. And so, you know, you got to own it.
Yeah.
You got to own it.
I love that. Be intentional on purpose, right? With what you want to be. Be intentional and be on purpose, and know and say who you want to be. Mm-hmm. You know, I think about that when I watched Wesley, Raul, and William, and Rob, when I saw them cross that finish line, the reality of Ironman became like, well, maybe. And then I had to go, okay, intentionally, I want to go do this, and purposely go set about doing it.
But then more importantly, what I respect is putting the sweat equity and the challenges you had to get yourself to a point and what you had to overcome. I mean, everything we're talking about, you can fit into your own experience in your Ironman journey to get there. That certainly inspires me. So I've got my running shoes and I'm trying to get back into shape. But I think, Tomas, that is a great point, that in your own story, that sequence that you went through to prepare yourself your own setback, having to get yourself back up and be very intentional and put the sweat equity in to it is something that, that's exactly, what we're talking about here, that inspires and motivates me along the way. So, you kind of walk that talk.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, David, listen, I appreciate you being on TM3 Impact, my man. It was a great conversation.
It was fun.
And I can't wait to hear about the next part of this journey.
That's coming.
Yeah.
That's coming as we, as I start to formulate the idea for the consulting business, and the DAZA Consulting Group. That is certainly in the formulation stage. And
any website yet? Anything?
Not yet.
Not yet?
I mean,
Okay.
I'm slow rolling a little bit.
I like that. That's good. 6 months.
Yeah, I'm still
6
I'm
months.
still in that retirement window. Give me a little bit of time, but we're looking maybe to the second half of the year. We're doing a launch and getting that up and running and using that as a platform to help other nonprofits and small businesses gain access to resources. So stay tuned. There may be a chapter 3 in the book. So we'll go on.
It's going to be an amazing chapter 3. You kidding me? It's going to be an amazing chapter 3. I'm excited to be along the ride, David. Have an amazing day.
it.
Thank you for being on TM3.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Take
Appreciate
care.
it.